Shwmai a croeso cynnes, and welcome to the What's Your Story podcast. I'm James Owen, a Welsh filmmaker and storyteller, and I'm passionate about sharing stories. This podcast is all about business owners sharing their journey, and we'll be speaking with directors, entrepreneurs and creatives from all across Wales to learn from their experiences. We believe everyone has a story to tell. What's your story? Shwmai a croeso nôl, welcome back to What's Your Story, and I've got an exciting guest on here today. In the last episode I talked about somebody coming over the bridge from Bridge. Now this is a bigger bridge because this person is from England. So she's travelled a long way to be here on What's Your Story today, which I'm very grateful. And today we're going to deep dive into really interesting conversations that discuss well-being, healing. And this guest today is a therapist. She's an author and a copywriter. And we'll talk all about her background. Debra Penrice, it's fantastic to welcome you to Llanelli down to the studio. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much, James.
Is it your first time in Llanelli?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Oh, what do you think of it so far?
It's great. It was easy to get here and the bridge was all clear.
The bridge was all clear. That's always good. That's good to hear. So, Debs, you've got a lot of different hats because you've got a fantastic background in marketing and copywriting. And, of course, you've launching a new book, which is very exciting.
Thank you.
And you've got your own business, Story Healing. So there's lots to talk about there. Can you maybe just summarise your sort of day-to-day, moving forward now in the 21st century, in 2026? What does a typical week look like for you, Debs?
Thanks, James. I guess a typical week for me is built largely around my two teenage girls. And the work that I do in my therapy clinic fits around that nicely. So mornings, I might be running a couple of therapy clinics first thing, and then I would typically do some writing and speak to my authors in the afternoon if I'm still working with authors.
Brilliant. So story healing is now sort of the primary focus for you.
Yes.
Just summarise, what is story healing?
So I founded the therapy practice really thinking about the inner stories that we tell ourselves. We quite often have those little inner voices, and when we listen to the same repetitive thought patterns over and over, we might find ourselves building a whole identity around them. So I felt that if we were going to look at a journey of healing, it would help to really unpick some of those stories, and that does come from my background as a copywriter and a story writer for businesses, actually.
So let's talk about your background. So as a copywriter, prior to that, you've got a love of books, you love reading, and you love listening to people's stories. So talk to me about your background as a copywriter. How did you start in that sort of industry? Because I think the copywriting skills you've got has really helped you get to where you are in launching a book. I think it'd be a lot more difficult if you weren't a copywriter to launch a book. But tell me, why did you start in the world of copywriting?
Well, when I first moved to Bristol, I was actually looking for copywriting jobs with agencies. And I found myself at a stage in my career where it was actually easier to get an in-house marketing job again. So instead of getting into copywriting, I moved into product development and marketing communication for a large financial services organisation. But within that role, I moved into the communications team where the PR agency were building the case studies about our commercial clients. And that led me into this love of storytelling about businesses and the journey that they'd gone on to use the financial services to boost and build their businesses. So managing that case study program, when I came out of my corporate job, it felt a natural step to start a copywriting agency where I could write those stories myself.
Fantastic. And that's where we met on that journey of copywriting. You were working with another guest of the podcast, Mr. Gedwin Tumulty. And you've been supporting Gedwin in his business with Coron, and that's where we actually collaborated on a project together because, I was doing the video bit for Gedwin and filming one of his brand films. And you, of course, were supporting with the writing. And we got connected that way. That must have been about a year and a half, 2 years ago, maybe.
That sounds about right, James. I guess when I joined Coron, I was still in the process of running the business called the Case Study Practice. And that's where interviewing people's clients to get those end stories was where the copywriting business had led me. And Corin was one of those clients that I started working with then. So, yeah, it was great to meet you on the video project for Corin.
I look at it now, full circle, how our paths have connected. And of course, we share the same business coach, Adam from Sales Academy. He's transformed my business the last couple of years now, bringing Amy more into it and now being an actual director of the business. Gosh, I've been in business 7 years, but I feel the last 2 years is really where it's taken a different shift of gears. But yeah, I've benefited tremendously from working with Adam. And I think it's important when you're running a business is to have that support and somebody you can pick up the phone and share problems. And have you experienced the same like me, Deb?
Absolutely. So in 2018, I first met Adam Brooks, and he's been on that journey with me to set up the company for the case study practice and set up the assets for the services I was providing as a copywriter. And not only that, he then introduced me to the lady who helped me get into therapy in terms of training, and she's now my mentor. So she's also from the Sales Academy background. Where Adam's helped the most was actually to build that brand in the background. So all the time I've been talking to him, I love stories, I love listening. How do I build the business chassis to support me to do that more? So
that's great, and it's amazing how we've connected over Adam and Sales Academy. It was actually Gerwin. It's working with Gerwin sort of opened the doors to work with Sales Academy, and I'm glad I worked with Gerwin because funny enough, I seen him last night. He was at an event in Swansea I was at, and I see him a lot around these days. It's brilliant, but because of Gerwin sold Sales Academy to me without them even realising, and on that point, right, talking about case studies, I often say to clients, especially in Stori Cymru, there's no better way of selling your brand than a customer doing so. Because I could say, in a video context, we could, there's no guarantees in this world, right? You can't get, if I'm doing a TV commercial, I can't guarantee you're going to get more sales, right? I can say you're going to get more awareness and you're going to get more views. That's a certain, but getting more sales, that's not my job. But I do find when you put out client testimonials or video case studies of or a business's customers saying good things about the business, that is just worth its weight in gold, because that is way more credible and trustworthy compared to the business owner himself or herself saying those words. So customer testimonials and case studies, they're so powerful, aren't they?
They really are. And it did highlight that love of listening for me, because those testimonials, you're right, they're gold dust in terms of marketing. I've worked with one software company who were looking at rapid growth, and they used their initial success with a couple of big brands, so Travelodge, Avis Budget Car Rentals. And I was interviewing those clients to really understand how that software had helped. And when you tell the story for something like software, it brings it alive. But also the customer will talk about the service and the product in ways that you hadn't potentially built into your marketing yet. So the language that they use to describe the product give you a much more accessible way of making it appeal to others that are in similar positions. And they do focus on the problems, because that's what the customer hired you for. And that problem focus means I get to design those questionnaires and really dig into the story, a little bit like you do on the podcast, James.
A little bit like this today. Yes, you're right. But I think there's an important point to make there about listening. I think storytelling, it is to tell a story. Yes, you need to be able to tell it verbally, or it could be, in my case, through the medium of film, or it could be through writing. There's a skill in communicating, in sharing that information, of course. Mm-hmm. But there's a big skill in communication of listening. I think people often underrate how listening is so important to telling a story. Because, in your case, if you're sitting there with other businesses, you need to be a real good listener, because I think the skill set in us, we're both storytellers. We're telling stories in different mediums, right? But we've got to really listen in intentively to listen to who the customer is and what they're trying to do, to then take what they say, because we're not subject matter experts in the worlds that we work in, right? We know how to tell a good story, but if I'm working with a construction company, I don't know how to build a house or a school, but I know how to tell our story. So listening is really, really important when you're writing someone else's story.
I think, again, that's another reason that Gerwin and I had connected, because his story forms part of the book that we're publishing. And when you sit down with someone and listen, perhaps over a cup of coffee, it's very different to turning that into the words that you perhaps want to share with the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
And so what I love about working both in the place of listening to the marketing stories, but also then the very private stories that people want to share in therapy, there's always a way of listening and drawing out more information. And I didn't learn that until I started my counselling studies journey, because most of us listen getting ready to respond. And actually, when you sit back and really listen and play it back to the person, you can get far more information out of them, and they start to see their own journey in a different way.
So you've had a wealth of experience, 25 years, I think, in marketing and comms and copywriting. And something for you is you've just found a love of listening to people's stories. And you can do that in a commercial sense, as you have in the world of marketing. But more recently, over the last few years, you've really had a joy in listening to people's stories, people who are facing some difficult times in life, and you want to be able to help them, because you yourself have had experiences where it's not been easy, and you've maybe learned from some of those experiences to maybe fuel yourself to go out and help others, because you've had some challenges, personal challenges, over the last few years yourself, haven't you?
I have, and I guess one of those came about quite a few years ago. I was really struggling with my sleep, and we had a brilliant summer, busy summer, lots going on at home, young children. And that summer where I didn't sleep actually resulted in quite serious mental health issues. I did have a breakdown. And coming out the other side of that, it was people like Adam. He was there as my business coach at the time. And you notice how really no one can legislate for how much that's going to affect you and knock you off course at the time.
Adam was a big help for you in that time. And what was the solution to sort of getting out of that? So with sleep in particular, that was a big challenge you had. The sleep caused the mental health breakdown. So was it fixing the sleep that helped with your mental health? And that was or was that just a symptom of a deeper problem?
I guess the sleep started to get better once I had medication after the breakdown. But I guess the support that I had at the time was to gently get back into my routine. And I think it's really important. We don't realise that sleep issues actually start in the day. They don't start at the night time.
Do they really?
Yeah. So would you believe it? 44% of adults talk about having sleep issues.
That's a lot of people.
In the UK, it's a lot of people. It's a real hidden challenge for a lot of people. But when we think about our routines in the day, and that's something, again, Adam does coach business owners on, is to how to build a routine so that your business doesn't run your life, and you actually build your life around how you want it to be and your ideal day. So that's some of the work that I did both in therapy and in business coaching. And the solution for me was to get a better routine. And I was very, very fortunate, because as we came through the lockdown period with the pandemic, one of my case study clients offered me a part-time job. And it meant that I could really get back into the structure of being employed for a little while, working in publishing, which was back with the books that I loved. And that routine really helped me then get things back on track so that I could work part-time on the copywriting, part-time with the authors. And that's when I started to hear people turn to writing when they're having a crisis. I was journaling a lot, and I saw that in my authors' writing. Lots of people write about stories based on their lives.
let's talk a bit about therapy, because that's a whole different world you've compared to the past experience you got in comms and in copywriting. What sort of happened in life for you to make that decision to retrain? Because I think it's important to acknowledge you're qualified and you've done your training in therapy, because you often hear that, it happens a lot in, it's okay to talk. There's this rhetoric within, and especially from my background with men's sports, right? Suicide is an issue with young males, and it's okay to talk. Boys don't like talking, men don't like talking, so it's important to talk. But I can sit down and have a pint with a friend, but there's a distinction between me speaking to them as a friend and them getting therapy, right? Because there's a way of listening and maybe share. I don't know if therapy's therapists just listen, but what I want to point out is people train in this space for a reason, because I have no qualifications sitting down having a pint with a friend in being a therapist. I can be a soundboard, of course, but for you, why is it that you wanted to be trained as a therapist? Because that's a totally different industry to what you're used to.
I think two reasons. One, I saw so many authors that were struggling. So they would write a book, but they would struggle with the confidence to then market it because they were suffering from acute imposter syndrome. So I saw a lot of authors struggling with the next steps after the creative piece was done, and I wanted to help them overcome that crisis of confidence. But secondly, exactly that description you've talked about, listening to a friend in the pub. I was listening to a friend of mine, and I was able to provide that support. And I thought, actually, wouldn't it be great to learn to be a better listener, to support people in a different way? And on that journey, I started training as a counsellor, actually, and looked very much at how a talking therapy can help people. And when I met my mentor and supervisor, Angie Hayes, she led me on the journey of looking actually for my next level of my qualifications to step into solution-focused therapy, because then we're working with the now. And we spend less time actually digging in the past and the problems that have happened, and more time thinking about, okay, we need to get to a level of acceptance. We need to understand our own skills. And sometimes we need to hear ourselves talk about those things in the therapy space. But then we need to acknowledge all the things that are good and move into that space of, what are the answers? What are the solutions for you? How would you like today to be better than yesterday? And solution focus then looks in that space of therapy, which is much more thinking about the present rather than the past.
So you got a book, you've launched that now and published it. I'm just curious, before we talk a bit about the book, the therapy came first, and then you had the idea of writing a book because you're working with authors. Because, you mentioned then imposter syndrome, because I do hear that a lot. Oh, I want to write a book. And it's, I think it's a good ambition to have. But also everyone's writing books, a bit like a podcast, right? Lots of people got podcasts, and especially in the world of publishing, you've got to give people a reason to read your book, right? Because there's so many on the shelf. Why is your book better than somebody else's? Because there's such a wide variety of offerings, isn't there, out there in this sort of space. But yeah, I'm just curious, did the book come as a byproduct of helping people? What's the story in starting the book?
So the book originally was going to be called Stories That Heal, because the idea had come to mind that when we share our stories, we start that healing journey, whether we share them privately or whether we actually turn them into something that we build as our personal brand story. And I had started writing the book, Stories That Heal, but a friend of mine actually stepped in and said, Debs, you've got so many examples of other people where stories have been healing for them. And they weren't necessarily my clients, but they were other coaches, therapists helping their clients, or they'd been on a personal journey. So this book is different because it contains 13 authors' stories, and they're a mix of personal transformation or a fiction story based on some of the work that they do, or an actual piece of work with a client that has been fictionalized, obviously to protect the identity of the client. So what's different about this is it's actually very, very ordinary stories, but yet they're extraordinary because they're always hidden. They're the things you don't talk about necessarily. They're the things we don't make a big deal about. And I hope that our readers will start to recognise themselves in one of the chapters, perhaps the one about revealing who you are to your friends, or the one about going on a personal spiritual journey, or the one about silencing that inner critic and dealing with that imposter syndrome. So they're all in there.
Fantastic. I'd love you to pick up the book so the viewers can see it. So the book is called Untold and Retold. And you've got a subtitle there. What's the subtitle?
Unblocking the Hidden Stories that Shape Our Lives. And that is really the principle of the book, the hidden stories that really make us who we are. They're part of our identity. And not everyone is confident about sharing them. And I love the fact that some of the authors in this book, it's their first step into writing. And I hope that they'll go on to write more.
Wow.
So, and Gerwin's one of them.
Gerwin is one of them. Gerwin is in there. Any other common people that have written stories?
So Melrose, who's been on your podcast as well,
Melrose.
Her story is about honouring, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with everyone.
Can't say too much because it's no spoilers. Becca Brooks, is she in there as well?
She's not. No,
She's
not this time. No,
she's just a champion.
She has reviewed it for us.
Yes, brilliant. Oh, fantastic. So yeah, it's great to see some What's Your Story graduates in there. And you've written a chapter yourself?
I've written 3 of the stories in there. So I've written one fictional journey, which is looking a little bit about how we might imagine ourselves in different lives. And I've written one that is based on a therapeutic journey, working with a client who is struggling with an inner critic, a harsh inner critic. And I've written one on a very ordinary kind of relationship issue that might come up for the types of people that I work with. So perhaps when past loves step back into our lives.
Yeah, fantastic. Is that the first of many? Because I noticed that's a volume 1, Deb.
Well, I'm looking forward to launching the programme for volume 2.
Fantastic. That's really exciting. Have you got a favourite in there? Can't say that, can you?
I can't. No, that'd be so difficult to do.
Because there's so many.
I think some of the stories we worked very closely on with the editor. So we had a professional editor work with us on the book, and some of them required a little bit more developmental input, but that meant I was much closer to the stories. And others of them are more personal to me because I already knew the authors. There were a couple of the collaborators that I met through doing the book. And one of them is Kimberly Vallis, and she runs a brilliant venture in Bristol for children with special needs who are being homeschooled. So some of them are special to me because of the purpose behind their businesses and the journey that they've been on to launch those businesses.
Wow, that's fantastic. So yeah, you've got story healing as a therapy practice. You're pushing forward with that now. Because you still like to dabble in a bit of comms and marketing because you're good at it. So where do you see yourself going in a few years' time now with this book launch imminent? So by the time this episode will be out, you would have had the launch. The books would be available to publish, so maybe you can share a bit about where to get them. But yeah, where do you see yourself personally, Deb? You're a parent. You've done a wealth of experience in marketing and copywriting. Yeah, are you just excited to help people and just make a living being a therapist now for the foreseeable?
So what I can see for story healing is a series of books that help people unlock these stories and look at those hidden themes that come up for other people. And in my therapy practice, I'll continue to work with my clients one-to-one. And there I'm really focusing on things like insomnia, anxiety, and that imposter syndrome that it can be crippling for people. And so continuing the practice is really important to me. I can see myself stepping into a space where I'd like to help more people writing. So doing that little bit of writing coaching with other authors is still part of my model. And I would love to welcome more therapists into the space where they're using these stories that they're working with clients to actually help them articulate how good they are. Because there are other modalities, not just the solution-focused therapy that I practice. There are people practicing things like havening. There are people practicing things like sound therapy. There are all sorts of different modalities, and no one healing journey is the same. It's like peeling layers of an onion. And I love to work with people in a solution-focused way, but that's not always right for some people. They're not ready to go on that journey to push forward and change things. They actually need more of the support. And sometimes it might be somatic healing. So again, one of the authors in here is very focused on breath work, and another does near dance. So there are different ways our bodies can express their needs. And it's like your gents in sport. Some people will go out on a bike for an hour, including my husband, and they'll find that gives them the chance to regulate and process all of those emotions of the day.
That's really interesting, because I've not, I don't believe so. I'm thinking back at my 30 years of my life. I don't think I've ever sat in a counselling session, or I've ever had therapy. Of course, I've had tough times, but I think it's just something about me that is very resilient. I think I've just, I've had certain things happen to me in life where I've just overcome it mentally. I think I'm quite strong mentally. And I don't know what that is, because, I'm intrigued to know a bit about the psychology of the people receiving the therapy, because you've mentioned a lot of different things there. It really fascinates me as an individual, because, for me to empathise, well, the sympathy and empathy, they're two different things. And forgive me, Debs, Welsh is my first language. So when I went to school, I learned all, I did mathemateg a gwyddoniaeth yn Gymraeg, maths and science in Welsh. So, it's interesting to me now talking about therapy, because you got empathy and sympathy. Because I've never been, somebody who has suffered depression, anxiety. I've never suffered it with myself to a severe degree. There's been days where I don't want to get out of bed, but I wouldn't call it chronic anxiety or chronic depression or anything like that. What's the difference between empathy and sympathy? Because I want to be able to, for customers or friends, I want to try and relate and connect to them. Remind me, which is empathy and which is sympathy?
I think sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. So it has that aspect of taking on the emotion that they're feeling, whereas empathy is sitting with them in that emotion and being able to understand it alongside them. So I guess it's just the angle at which you're sitting with them.
Okay.
Sitting next to them would be like empathy, and sitting opposite them would be sympathy.
That's really interesting, because you mentioned that earlier about different types of therapy. So I sort of think of therapy as this: I'm sitting in a room, I'm on a sofa with my shrink, sort of thing. That's the perception I'm getting, because I've not experienced some of these things, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at all, but I've just not needed to I've not needed therapy. But what are the sort of differences then? Because you've touched on some of your authors using different techniques, havening, semantics, and can you just break down some of those applications of therapy?
I guess a typical session with me, we would spend half the time talking, and then actually half the time you'd be lying on the couch, and we wouldn't be talking, and we'd be working with your subconscious to actually get you into that relaxation state. So hypnotherapy works in a very specific way. Some of the other therapies might work with more talking or more movement. And I guess each one works in a different way. And your point about being resilient and perhaps being strong mentally, it's a really important one. Where people find themselves in difficult positions is if they're lonely and they don't have that support network. So people can feel isolated even if they're surrounded by people. And that would typically get them to a place where they might need to talk more with a stranger, because the stranger doesn't have any preconceptions, and we can offer something that we call unconditional positive regard, which really helps people get into that space where it's non-judgmental for them. But I think that's a really important aspect of therapy, building that relationship with the therapist. And I'm not sure if I've really answered your question, but the different modalities, some will involve talking about the problems, and typically CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, that one would involve a lot of exercises to analyse where do the thought patterns take you when you're perhaps sinking into that space of feeling depressed. Whereas perhaps somebody working with havening, you would only need to talk about the emotions and start to process them, because it's much more of a physical touch-based therapy.
Oh, it does answer my question. I just find it fascinating from a psychological point of view, and I'm trying to empathise with people who, because I've had to help people through tough times, being a sounding board. I've got friends who have experienced divorce and loss of children and parents and suicide. There's all these things, and I'm gutted when I hear any of these sorts of things. And yeah, it's just something I want to get better at, is how can I support people in my sphere? Because I've never been in their shoes to know what it's like receiving the therapy, but I'm just finding it interesting to know what are the different modes.
I think one of the most important things is, if you are faced with a person who has been through something that has affected them in a big way, some of us can feel like we need to minimise it because other people have bigger struggles. And there's always that little bit of comparisonitis for people where they might think, well, I can't talk about my problems because they're not as big as the person who's got someone over here in a much worse off state. So I guess the first thing I always like to do with people is ask them, what would be most helpful for you right now? Do you need me to cook a dinner? Or do you need me to listen? Or do you just need me to check in but not expect a reply? So some people contact if they're feeling like in a down space. It's not actually easy for them to send a reply, but it was just for someone to check in. I saw a great video where someone said, I'm going to phone you at 8:30 every morning. You don't have to answer, but you know that I'm thinking of you. So simple things, ask them.
That's brilliant. And asking a friend, how can I be of service? How can I help you? Do you want me to do something simple like this or that or that? That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So the book is out now. You can buy it. Where can you buy the book? Debs, where's it available for purchase?
Amazon and all the major online retailers as well will be stocking the book. There's a Kindle version to be able to download to your reader, and we're looking at how we can get it into bookstores as well. Some of the independent bookstores in Bristol have been really helpful.
There's a few bookshops there. Fantastic. Can you hold the book up again? I just love to see it. So Untold and Retold. And just lastly, who is this book for?
It's aimed for those people that are perhaps thinking that their story isn't that important. So when you read this, there are a few coaching questions within it, just to ask you, what does the story bring up for you? How does it resonate with you? So people who have perhaps been through major life events and downplayed what they've been through, but perhaps they're wondering, could this be helpful for someone else? So it might inspire them to think about how they share their story too.
Fantastic. And I relate to that so much because I'm a big believer. It's on the back of my T-shirt. We are all storytellers. And that applies to every individual because we all have a story to tell. Yeah. No story is greater than the other. Maybe some are more interesting than others. That's subjective, but I think we've all got a story to tell. And it's not just about the one who makes the most noise, because your book is about those that haven't been told or have been told, but maybe haven't had a platform to share that.
And I think the important part about this book is the retelling. So sometimes we do need to reposition it so that we can come through it in a different way.
Yeah, that's great. And if anyone wants to know more about you, Debs, and connect with you as an author, maybe you want to hear from more ideas, you want to collaborate with more therapists, build your network, how can people reach out to you?
So the website is storyhealing.net and you can find me there.
And you're on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn, yes. Debra Penrice on LinkedIn, yeah.
Fantastic.
And I guess that is one of the blogs that I first wrote, James. It's a really good point. All storytellers are also healers and teachers.
Oh, come on. That's a brilliant one. I got to read that. Is that on your website?
Yeah, it's a blog on the website. Yeah, it's one of the first ones I wrote.
That's brilliant. That could be the title of this podcast, maybe. Yeah, that'd be good. I just love to leave this last question for our audience. All of those watching and listening, they got to hear a little bit about you and your story, which has been so insightful, and how you're helping people. If you could sit down for an hour and you could hear anyone's story That could be somebody influential, inspirational. That could be a fictional person. It could even be someone in that very book. Mm-hmm. Whose story would you love to hear?
Oh, without a doubt, Billy Connolly's.
And why is that? He just makes you laugh.
Yeah, he does. He's always made me laugh. I am married to a Scot. He's one of the people that inspires me most to laugh more in life and keep that playful aspect.
Well, we've got three things in common. We've got Gerwyn, Sales Academy, and I married a Scot. So there we go. Comes in threes. Debs, thank you so much for taking the trip down from Bristol to come on. And yeah, it's been a joy to welcome you on What's Your Story. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with others. I'm sure it's going to be a big help. And I wish you all the best with your book launch. And I hope you sell many books.
Thank you very much, James. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.